feeling fulfilling, I should say, promises to yourself, meaning like keeping up with your agreements with yourself is important. And that's why I wanted to jump on a little earlier than I normally jump on. But I said that I would be back today, right? To bring you day 4 of these sharings of stories. But I also made a promise to my best friends that we would meet today. So I want to keep the promise to myself of consistency, fulfill the thing that I said, which is coming here to share with you and celebrating life with my friends. Um, all of those things because they help us to stay mentally and emotionally healthy, right? We are the only people that are responsible for our happiness and our consistency and our lives and all of those good things, right? So trying to find the best angle. So just trying to fulfill those things. Quotes, affirmations, and stories are great tools for shifting our mindset. And in today's mindful moment, we're going to talk about breaking cycles. So let's jump into it with the quote. I started printing these things out so that I would remember everything I had to say. I enjoy creating my own narrative. Here's what I want you to remember: beliefs and habits inform your reality. Your reality creates your narrative. So remember to create wisely. About 4 years ago, I began collecting quotes from wise women and using them as reminders to help get me through my day and as a kind of like a bit of guidance, right? And I'm not quite sure why, but for some reason, I began to pair those quotes with those affirmations. So the three for today are remembering that your beliefs and your habits inform your reality creates your narrative, and that you have the freedom, the ability to choose the narrative that you want to live. So I noticed that when I began pairing the quotes with the affirmations, and started noticing that I had these lived experiences that kind of paralleled and aligned with some of those affirmations. Um, and notice them because I began to remember stories or examples of it, right? So, another way of shifting your mindset is asking yourself, is something true, right? And if it's true, give me an example of it, right? I am happy, I am loved by myself and by other people. And is that true? Yeah, it is true. What's an example of that? I'm going out with my best friends later, right? That's an example of love that I have in my family. So let's get into this story, right? uh, Go ahead and feel free to get cozy or leave the video playing while you complete some other task that you need to do on this wonderful Saturday. I definitely encourage you to ask questions because the idea is that through my sharing of stories, um, that I'm demonstrating how sharing is caring, and that maybe as you listen to this story, it sparks some questions or some ideas within you that creates a dialogue that we can all grow and be better people from. So let's get into it. Got to get my story. The term falling from grace has been used many times and will be used many more. I think it's a reference to falling from God's grace. I imagine this fall means that you are detached from peace, protection, abundance, and love. I would imagine that this fall to be overwhelming because the fallen knows and remembers what it means to be in grace. I've seen this fall play out in movies when an heavenly being falls from the sky and must exit from heaven. The crazy thing is, someone with a drug addiction once told me or once used this heavenly comparison to describe their first high. They told me that they reached heaven and its wearing off was their descent back to earth. Oh, I got lost for a second. And their descent was, and their, let's go back from that line. That's the thing about doing this live, right? Can't edit it. They told me they reached heaven and the wearing off was their descent back to earth. They now knew heaven, and that remembering was too much to handle at times, and that subsequent episodes were failed attempts to get back to that place. I have not experienced this type of high, and I will accept this analogy as their truth and possible truth for others. In acceptance of this possible truth, I wonder how many times I've watched this descent. If the user is descending from earth back to heaven, how does it look to the bystander? My shirt was damp because my heart was still accepting the truth my eyes had witnessed. For the past weeks, maybe months, the same scenario repeated in the neighborhood around my job. This time, I was crouched down at the bus stop, shirt wet with tears, tying his shoes. He sat slumped, eerily slowly falling to his side. This was what the descent back to earth looked like to me. My uncle was once again high in public and slowly descending to the ground. I'd taken up the habit of propping him up and tidying him up in any kind of way that I could, but that was all that I could do. He was too far gone to remember me, and I cried because I remembered the parts of him that had never returned. His smile no longer contained any teeth, and honestly, I could no longer remember the sound of his voice. I only remembered what it felt like. I cried because I no longer heard his jokes and felt his hugs, because these were parts of him that never returned. So, like so many other times, I tied his shoes, I propped him up, and I walked to work. Beliefs and habits inform your reality. My reality was informed by the habits of those around me. They say addiction is an illness, and some of us are predisposed to it. My biological family makeup set me squarely in a position to take on this addictive reality. You learn to navigate the world a little differently when the people around you are suffering and would do anything to ease their pain. And as a result, my world, my reality felt a little less safe and dependable. Your reality creates your narrative. My reality was one of fear and shame. I remember the day in fourth grade when we were taught about marijuana and its other names and about other narcotics. I'm not sure why this memory stands out, but I remember walking down the street and looking at the sidewalk and kicking pipes as a child. And it hit me that top paper was used to roll marijuana in. And it clicked that the adults around me were smoking marijuana and doing other things. With this newfound piece of clarity, my eyes were now open to see all of the other things that they were doing. As a child, I feared falling victim to addiction and felt ashamed of my family members. I wanted something different. And luckily, my perfectly imperfect mother is who she is. They say ignorance is bliss. So maybe this blissful gift is what allowed my mother her freedom, her ability to create her own narrative, her own path, and live her own life. I'm not quite sure how she didn't see what was going on and was only minimally affected, but her reality intrigued me. My elementary school education included enough information about drugs and drug abuse that I could not live in the same reality that my mother lived in, but I was still intrigued. This meant that I witnessed a life of two narratives. It taught me that multiple truths can exist in the same place at the same time, that I'm free to choose and to create a narrative for myself. I choose this day and every day to be round rather than squarely fit into a narrative of my mother's siblings and other family members. Create wisely. Whew. Excuse me. No squares around here. I've decided to be well rounded. Inspired by the ignorance/innocence of my mom, I was determined to create another narrative for an older me and those following me. I felt school and media portrayed one side of addiction as being both the victim, those with an addiction as being both the victim and the villain. As I questioned how both experiences could live in one body, I was open to the idea that there had to be more. In a very superficial bound of research, I learned that there were all kinds of addictions. And based on your society/the community that you live in, there might be negative connotations associated with them, but they all would vary based on where you live. A changing factor was when I reframed addiction in my mind. When I, excuse me, when I viewed addiction as a mental illness that involves the pleasure portion of the brain, I understood that a person could be addicted to just about anything. This information allowed me to focus on the denotation rather than the connotation. Without the shame, I was able to have transparent conversations with my mother, with family members, and my children. Identifying and acknowledging addiction became the focus of the conversations with my children, excuse me. I told them if they find themselves extremely focused on a thing so much that they found themselves being dishonest, neglecting their basic needs and those around them, then it was probably time to take a step back, reflect, and reevaluate. We also talked about how this could be the truth for others and how to show care, create healthy boundaries, and not be spirit damagers. That's like a joke in our family, you know, don't be a spirit damager. Everyone has their own personal path to their heaven that is full of twists and turns and falls. And being careful to not intentionally damage another spirit while you're on your path to your heaven, to your happiness through your journey. They say addiction is an illness, and some of us are predisposed to it. My biological family makeup set me squarely in a position to take on this addictive narrative. I choose this day and every day to be round enough that I do not fit the narrative, well rounded enough to be well informed about addictions that run in my family, well rounded enough to be compassionate to those who are suffering, well rounded enough to create a narrative for me and those coming behind me. In the words of the very wise Deja Kennedy, I enjoy creating my own narrative. Beliefs and habits inform your reality. Your reality creates your narrative, and create wisely. I hope that this sharing brings you some peace, some clarity, some thoughts, some relief, something that helps you to live a better space, have a better day, have a better time, just be better. I also welcome questions that you might have about something that I shared. Remembering that I'm just a layman, right? Just sharing my personal experiences. I cannot speak for a larger community. I can only share what I have experienced and on my own lived experience. I also want to be very clear that while there was there were people in my family that suffered and suffering with addictions, I also had a balance, right? Um, I did have people that were not. I did have parents that worked. I did have a home over my head the entire time. So that this is about some of the other things that were experienced. Um, yeah. If you have questions, if you have ideas, let me know in the comments below and I'll do my best to respond to them. Also, check out the information in the details. As I mentioned, once I started collecting these words of wisdom and using them as guidance to help me get through my day, I also started visioning, imagining these affirmations, right? I can create my own narrative. And Eventually, what that led to is me designing a series of guided journals being different than the blank journals because they offer a prompt, a question for you to reflect on and write on. So I'm somebody that is a active journaler. I journal just about every day. I'm good at opening up a book and just beginning to write, something that my mother instilled in me as a very, very young child. And I know that other people want to step into journaling. So guided journals is my way to practice my creativity and to be in service to people in community. So please check them out. I'll be back on around this time tomorrow with day 5. The goal is for me to share 30 stories over the next few days. This was day 4. I'll be back tomorrow with for day 5. And just be great. See you soon. Bye bye.